This isn't an intro. I'm really sweeping my carpet. What is going on, guys? So today we are back, and today we're actually going to be taking another look into another Pokemon that's featured inside of a lot of cups that's happened over the last few months in Pokemon Go. But today we're actually looking at a fairly recent addition to the Pokemon available, meaning that this Pokemon actually wasn't available for, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that it wasn't available for 2 out of the 3. I think it got released right when Season 1 Regionals happened. I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember bringing it up and talking about it. So either way, today we're actually going to be looking at Gastrodon, which is a water and ground type Pokemon maxing out at 2324. So actually could be really interesting in the Ultra League. But with a 1 on attack, 15 defense, 14 stamina at level 24.5, you can hit that clean 1500, keeping us inside of the Great League while still maximizing our stat product there. Now, according to my spreadsheets and all the numbers that I have ran for the freestyle, just every Pokemon available in the actual Great League, out of 550 possible uniquely typed Pokemon, we are 78th in bulk and 56th in stat product. So I have to say that is crazy high. That is an amazing feat, because out of 550, that puts us really, really high in terms of our stat product and our bulk there. But of course, all of this actually does come from our base stats here with a 169 on attack, 143 on defense, and a 244 on stamina. We are looking pretty freaking great there. So, being that all this looks amazing, once we get down here, we do know that sometimes our moves can either make or break us here. So, first thing we need to take a look at is our fast moves here. We do have Mud Slap. Yeah, it's not the good one. It's not Mud Shot, but it's still an okay move here. 2 2/3 energy per turn, so 2.66 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn. After we get Stab, it does bump up to 3.6. And then we have this amazing Hidden Power. For 2.66 energy per turn, we still get 3 damage per turn, so it's almost the exact same as having Mud Slap, except the stab benefits are kind of up in the air. Depending on whether you have Hidden Power Ground or Hidden Power Water could determine whether you get stab benefits here. If not, at worst, you're going to be doing 3 damage per turn, which isn't too bad. So I will tell you that looking through some of the numbers for Hidden Power, I always despise doing Pokemon that have Hidden Power just because there's so much information to compile. There's so many simulations that I try to drill down into with just one moveset, so timesing that by 18 different types, or in theory 18 different fast moves, is just so much harder. So I will tell you though that I did look into a couple of variations, and for each cup that we go over today, we're going to mention some hidden powers that I definitely think would benefit to have. If you have those, you possibly could do really well in that cup, but otherwise we are going to stick with Mud Slap as our main fast move for today. Next, moving into our charge moves here, we do have 4. Yes, there are 4. I did double check myself because on PvPoke they do not list Earthquake. But Earthquake was technically a screw up on Niantic's part when they accidentally released Gastrodon, and we technically have Earthquake on some Gastrodons. It's just extremely rare. But either way, I did want to include it just to kind of show that it is a possibility that you could run into one with Earthquake. Being that it's not on PvPoke, it didn't work out in a lot of the simulations that we ran, but either way. So Water Pulse here, for 60 energy we get 70 damage at a 1.17 damage per energy ratio. After stab, it does get bumped up to 84 for a 1.4. Earthquake here, for 65 energy we get 120 damage at a 1.85. 144 after stab for a 2.22 on the damage per energy ratio. Body Slam here, for 35 energy we get 60 damage at a 1.71. We do not carry that normal typing, so no stab benefits there. And Earth Power, for 55 energy we get 90 damage at a 1.64. After stab, it does get bumped up to 108 for a 1.96. So, the most enticing move out of all those is definitely going to be Body Slam. Such a low energy cost, such a low cost of entry is definitely a really cool thing about it. And then looking between Water Pulse and Earth Power, I mean, I could maybe see some benefits to running Water Pulse in some cups, but in general, Earth Power is just way better. It's way more efficient. It costs less. It does more damage. Like, there's just not a whole lot of reason to run Water Pulse unless you just really need some type of water type move on your team. So for the purposes of this video, we are going to stick with mainly Mud Slap, Body Slam, and Earth Power, and then we'll talk a little bit about some hidden powers along the way. Just for those unaware, we do have 3 cups like we talked about a little bit earlier that we are featured in this go around. Boulder Cup, Tempest Cup, and the Season 1 Regionals allow Gastrodon to be used. Now, like I said before, I'm pretty sure Boulder Cup I know Gastrodon wasn't available for, and the Tempest Cup I'm pretty sure we didn't have him, but around the time that Season 1 Regionals got, announced or started, actually happening, I'm pretty sure we got Gastrodon introduced. Either way, we are available in those 3 cups, so those are the ones that we're going to be focusing on today. Now, in the Boulder Cup, we're going to mainly focus, like I said, Mud Slap, Body Slam, and Earth Power here. In our 0 vs 0, we do end up with a 43.8%, actually beating out Magneton, Bastiodon, Melmetal, Jirachi, Bronzong, Steelix, and Marshtomp. So, some pretty notable wins there in the Boulder Cup. Now, if you remember that far back, or if you've possibly been looking into the Boulder Cup lately, basically Skarmory and Medicham are the 2 that kind of run that cup, and we don't really end up beating either of those, so it's kind of a meh kind of thing. In the 1 vs 0 though, we do actually end up winning 81.3%, and oddly enough, the 2 Pokemon that we still end up losing to are Torterra, which makes a lot of sense considering our typing, and Skarmory, which is pretty rough. So we do end up gaining the win on Medicham there, but we still not hitting on a whole lot in terms of the Skarmory matchup, but an 81.3% is still great overall. Next, in our 0 vs 1, we do move down to 18.8%, but to be expected considering we are a shield down against our opponent here. We do actually have wins up against Magneton, Bastiodon, and Melmetal though. So as you can kind of imagine, Magneton, Bastiodon, and Melmetal are going to be showing up a lot in terms of our wins. We are really geared towards taking out those 3 Pokemon in particular with our moveset here. Last shield scenario for the Boulder Cup, we do hit that 1 vs 1, which is a 43.8, so almost mirroring the same as our 0 vs 0, except with a few matchup changes here. We still have the Magneton, Bastiodon, and Melmetal, just like we mentioned, but we actually have Lucario, Toxicroak, Jirachi, and Steelix showing up here this time, which is actually pretty interesting. So back in the 0 vs 0, we actually had Marshtomp, where this time we have Lucario, and then we had Bronzong, whereas this time we actually have Toxicroak, which is pretty interesting. I actually kind of like that. Some notable hidden powers that I think you should possibly look into if you do have these on your Gastrodon are Flying, Water, and Grass. If you have either of those 3, it actually sets you up to have a really interesting matchup spread up against the entire Boulder Cup. Flying, not so much, honestly, but the fact that fighting is such a prevalent typing in the Boulder Cup, it's going to be good against Steel, it's going to be good against Rock. The only thing that Flying really has going for it though is up against those fighting types. So while it does kind of hinder you in some areas, you still do retain that Earth Power for your ground type coverage, and you still have Body Slam to be completely spammable. The Flying type fast move could really help out if you had Hidden Power Flying. Water kind of runs the same thing, where it's going to be good up against both rock and ground, but you kind of don't have a whole lot for the fighting, whereas when you still have the water type fast move, you would still have your Earth Power and your Body Slam just to kind of spam out the Body Slam, and your Earth Power to of course cover the Steel. The last one that I mentioned was the grass typing, which is still very interesting because it's actually going to be good up against both rock and ground as well. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it could help you out in a lot of similar ways that the water typing does as well, but it could be resisted in some weird scenarios. But either way, I definitely think that you should look into those 3 hidden powers. If you have them, possibly look into the Gastrodon yourself. Overall, in the Boulder Cup, I'd say we're doing pretty good. On average, we actually end up with a 46.93% across all 4 of those shield scenarios. So let that kind of stick in your mind, because we're going to come back to that number after we go through all 3 of our cups here. Next, moving on to the Tempest Cup, we are of course going to stick with our Mud Slap, Body Slam, and Earth Power to begin with. Starting with our 0 versus 0, we actually have a 35% here. We actually have wins against Magneton, Alolan Sandslash, Lantern, Alolan Golem, Raichu, Frostlass, and Steelix here. So some pretty good wins there. Just to kind of jog your memory, the Tempest Cup was Electric, Ice, Flying, and Ground. So being a ground type attacker kind of helps us up against the electrics, kind of hinders us up against the flying, and then we're going to kind of have some neutrality up against the ground and the steel as far as damage output goes there. So kind of a mixed bag here, but a lot of the Pokemon that end up showing up are going to have some ties to either steel or electric, while Frostlass actually has some ties to some neutral damage, but it's kind of glassy either way. Next, moving on to our 1 versus 0, we actually bump up to a whopping 75% here. So we actually do have losses up against Skarmory, Altaria, Abomasnow, and Tropius. So if you remember back in the Tempest Cup, the biggest deal was to have a Razor Leaf user to kind of cover a lot of the things that, you know, you were basically gonna run into in the meta. So it's no surprise being that we have the exact same typing as the Mud Boys, which I guess Gastrodon is an honorary Mud Boy at this point. You can kind of imagine Abomasnow and Tropius there are going to be the biggest losses for us, while Altaria and Skarmory are just 2 powerhouses in the Great League, so no surprise there either. Next, we move into our 0 versus 1, which is a 20%, and we actually have wins up against Raichu, Alolan Sandslash, Alolan Golem, and Magneton. Considering the fact that our opponent actually has a shield up on us this go around, it makes complete sense that all 4 of these Pokemon would have some kind of weakness to the ground type fast move. So those make complete sense here. Last shield scenario for the Tempest Cup here, we do have our 1 versus 1, which is a clean 50% here. So we actually do have wins up against Magneton, Alolan Golem, Alolan Sandslash, Raichu, Lantern, Piloswine, Celio, Frostlass, Quagsire, and Steelix, rounding out the last of our wins there. So some hidden powers that I think you should look into for the Tempest Cup are going to be the electric, ice, and water hidden powers. So the electric actually helps us quite a bit up against the flying types in the cup, which, I mean, Skarmory is such a huge threat. It makes a lot of sense why the electric type would really shine here. The ice also is really, really good here because the ice typing is actually going to help us up against Tropius, which is one of the bigger threats here as well. And then we do have the water, which is just going to be generally decent up against the ground type Pokemon that show up here, and some other things could make some really nice neutral damage for a lot of matchups that you do encounter in the Tempest Cup. So in total for the Tempest Cup, averaging out those 4 shield scenarios, we actually end up with a 45% as far as our win-loss ratio goes. Keep that in mind, like I said, for the Boulder Cup. Our Boulder Cup was a 46.93, our Tempest was a 45%, so keep those in mind because we're getting ready to talk about that after we talk about Season 1 Regionals. Last but not least here, we do have our Season 1 Regionals, which, like I said, Mud Slap, Body Slam, Earth Power are going to be our main moveset here. Looking at the 0 versus 0, we actually end up with a 52.2% here. So considering that we have more than 50%, there's a lot of Pokemon that show up here, but we're just going to go over our losses really fast. Quagsire, Medicham, Fortress, Azumarill, Whiscash, Umbreon, Skarmory, Altaria, Venusaur, and Tropius are the big losses for us, which most of those make quite a bit of sense. I mean, especially the grass types down there at the bottom, going to be showing up a lot considering that we do have that super duper weakness to the grass typing. And then we have Quagsire, Medicham, Fortress, Azumarill. I mean, most of these are like big players in the Great League as is. Next, moving on into our 1 versus 0, we actually end up with an 82.6. So definitely the highest one that we've seen all day. The only losses that we have here are Azumarill, Quagsire, and Medicham, which is okay to be expected. I mean, Medicham and Azumarill are kind of like the top of the tier list when it comes to the Great League here, so those make quite a bit of sense. Next, moving into our 0 versus 1, we do end up with a 26.1, which is also the highest that we've seen here. Magneton, Bastiodon, Skuntank, Haunter, Alolan Muck, and Melmetal are going to be no problem considering we do have some ground type moves here. Basically, Magneton, Bastiodon, both of those are going to carry the steel typing, as well as another typing going to be super duper weak to the ground type damage, whereas Skuntank, Alolan Muck, Haunter, and Melmetal are all going to carry a weakness because of the typings that they have, whether it's poison, dark combination, or just pure steel there. So very, very nice in terms of our 0 versus 1. Last but not least, we do end on our 1 versus 1, which is a 56.5, so just barely beating our 0 versus 0. We do actually have quite a few losses here that kind of make some sense again. Whiscash, Charizard, Medicham, Umbreon, Sableye, Skarmory, Venusaur, Altaria, and Tropius. So Charizard's kind of the weird one there because I wasn't really expecting to see Charizard, but if you think that because Charizard's typing allows him to at least take neutral damage to the ground type move, then it kind of sets that up to be okay. And then on top of that, we don't really have anything else to really hit Charizard for more than neutral damage. We only have ground type moves or normal type moves. So that makes complete sense. And then the other ones are just, I mean, they're gonna be kings as themselves, so there's not really a whole lot to explain in those areas because those just make complete sense. Some hidden powers that I definitely think you should look into for Season 1 Regionals are definitely going to be the electric, fire, and water here. So the electric typing is going to help cover a lot of the big players in the water area, kind of like a Zoomeril, and definitely some other ones out there as well. Even that Charizard that we just talked about could definitely end up having problems with the electric type fast move. Fire here is actually going to help you cover a lot of the grass types that end up showing up, and possibly some of the ice types that you could run into here. But definitely the grass types, it would be nice to have, you know, something. I mean, of course you wouldn't want to go like stalemate between the two Pokemon. You wouldn't want to start off with yourself versus a grass type Pokemon, but in the event, switch into Gastrodon to kind of protect yourself from a nearly fainted grass type. A fire type fast move is probably the best thing to go up with there. And of course, the water typing here will also actually help up against a lot of the ground types that show up here, a lot of the fire types that are still in the meta, just some great neutral damage in a lot of other situations where possibly the ground type wouldn't have been as effective. So averaging out across all 4 of those shield scenarios here, the Season 1 Regionals actually ends up with a 54.35%. So the reason that I told you to hold on to those is because on average, we do not drop more than 45% of our matches here, which is insane to think about. So I have to actually say that across all 3 of these cups, I would highly recommend checking out Gastrodon and seeing if you like it, because Gastrodon is powerful, super, super good in a lot of scenarios, a lot of versatility, especially with hidden power, a lot of different ways that you could take the Gastrodon and gain a lot of success off of it, I'm sure. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Always remember that if you do have a deep dive idea, make sure you go down into the description, join the Discord below, and get into the channel to start voting. I am currently working on the tournament situation just to kind of keep you guys updated. I'm basically writing an entirely new section of the bot to kind of help with setting things up and making things a lot more streamlined so that it's easier on you guys and easier on us as the tournament organizers. So thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll go ahead and roll those ending credits for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.